My brother showed up with a moving truck on a Tuesday morning in October. I was standing on the front porch of the house my grandparents left me, holding a coffee mug that had gone cold about 20 minutes earlier. I watched the truck slow at the end of the driveway. I watched Tyler climb out from the passenger side, a manila folder tucked under his arm, and a look on his face like a man who had already decided how the day was going to go. He hadn't noticed the other vehicles yet. Two of them, parked along the curb, a county official's sedan and a police cruiser. They'd pulled up at 8:47 that morning. Tyler arrived at 9:17. He started walking toward me. Then he saw them. His stride didn't stop, but it slowed. Just enough. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. My brother stepped out of that truck like he owned the place, because he thought he did. People in my family called me the quiet one. They didn't mean it as a compliment. It was just the thing people said when they couldn't think of anything else. When someone asked about me at a holiday dinner and the honest answer was that I hadn't done anything flashy enough to mention. Tyler had trophies on the mantle by the time he was 12. Swim team, debate club, 1 year of football. My mother kept them dusted. My report cards came and went without comment. That wasn't cruelty on her part. It was just how the family was organized. Tyler needed attention. I didn't ask for it, so I didn't get much. My grandparents were different. For the last 3 years of Grandpa Harold's life, I drove 45 minutes each way, twice a week, to take him to dialysis. Every Tuesday and Thursday, without fail. I wasn't asked to. There was no conversation about whether someone else could do it. I just started going and kept going. Harold would sit in the passenger seat with a yellow legal pad on his knee. He kept all his financial records by hand, and sometimes he'd read numbers out loud and ask me whether they added up. I'd open a spreadsheet on my laptop when we got back to the house, and we'd work through it together. We never talked about money, exactly. We talked about the numbers. There's a difference. Grandma Ruth's dementia had made those records harder for her to track toward the end. So I tracked them instead. Nobody assigned me that job. It was just something that needed doing, and I was there. One evening on the drive back, Harold was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You always have to know your people, son. Really know them." I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought he was just talking. My mother's version of our family was simple. Tyler was the one with potential, and I was the one who was fine on his own. Harold and Ruth had a different version. When their attorney, Gerald Price, called me into his office 2 weeks after the funeral, I found out just how different. Harold had left a handwritten letter alongside the will. Gerald read it to me quietly in a small office that smelled like old paper. "We know who showed up, son. This is for you." That sentence changed everything. And it started a war I didn't see coming. 2 weeks after the funeral, Gerald Price's office called all of us in. The room was small. Gerald sat behind his desk. Tyler and my mother sat to my left. I sat on the right, in a chair with a loose armrest that wobbled every time I moved. Gerald read the will clearly, without preamble. The house. 2 savings accounts. A small investment portfolio. Total value approximately $900,000. All of it left, in full, to me. Tyler went white. My mother said nothing. She sat very still with her hands folded in her lap and her face completely unreadable, and that stillness was somehow worse than anything she could have said out loud. In the parking lot afterward, Tyler found me before I reached my car. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, flat voice that I hadn't heard from him before. "You manipulated them," he said. "You were always there because you knew this was coming. You planned the whole thing." I looked at him. I didn't argue. There was nothing I could say in a parking lot that would land anywhere useful. So I got in my car, and I drove home, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time thinking about something I'd never questioned before, whether the person who shows up is always the person who deserves to stay. He looked me in the eye and called me a thief. And for a moment, just a moment, I actually wondered if he was right. Within the week, my mother called. Her voice was warm, measured, the voice she used when she was trying to find common ground. She talked for 19 minutes about what Harold and Ruth would have wanted, about the importance of family, about how there must be a way to make things fair. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt once. But I noticed something she never did. She never asked how I was doing. She never said his name. She wasn't grieving on that phone call. She was negotiating. When we hung up, I sat with that for a while. Then I called my cousin Megan. "Keep records of everything," she said. "Starting now." I didn't hear from Tyler directly after that parking lot conversation. What I heard instead came secondhand, through Megan about 3 weeks later. He'd been making calls. Aunts, uncles, cousins on both sides, people I hadn't spoken to in months. His version of events was consistent enough that it sounded rehearsed. I had isolated our grandparents in their final years. I had kept the family away. I had taken advantage of two elderly people when they were most vulnerable, and what I'd done had a name: elder abuse. My mother was on the family group chat, adding context, filling in gaps, endorsing the narrative with the quiet authority of a parent who believed what she was saying. Megan sent me the screenshots. I sat at the kitchen table and read through them slowly, all the way to the end. The thing that hurt wasn't being called a manipulator by Tyler. I'd had some time to prepare for that. What hurt was watching people I'd known my whole life read those messages and not ask me a single question. Not one. They just went quiet in a particular way that told me they'd already made up their minds. I didn't respond to the group chat. I forwarded everything to Megan and asked her to hold on to it. 6 weeks after the will was read, my phone rang. The caller identified himself as Mr. Levin from the County Land Registry office. He was calm, professional. He told me that a title transfer application had been filed, a document that, if processed, would have transferred ownership of the house from my name to Tyler's. He said the application had been flagged during routine review. The notary seal on the document didn't match any registered notary in the county. It wasn't a clerical error. The stamp was fake. We held the application because something didn't look right, he said. You should call a lawyer today. I thanked him. I hung up. I was in a grocery store parking lot, and I sat in my car for 11 minutes without moving. I kept thinking about the manila folder Tyler had been carrying when he left Gerald Price's office. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. Someone had tried to put my brother's name on a deed he had no legal right to touch. That was called a fraudulent title transfer, and the county already had it on file. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Sonia Cruz. 2 weeks after that, a certified letter arrived from an attorney representing my mother. The letter was 3 pages, single-spaced. It claimed that I had exerted undue influence over Harold and Ruth in their final months, that their cognitive decline had made them susceptible to manipulation, and that the will did not reflect their true wishes. It demanded $150,000 in compensation. Sonia read it in about 4 minutes. This is thin, she said. Harold's mental clarity at the time of signing is well documented. They have no evidence of manipulation because there wasn't any. But we need to respond formally, and we need to do it with everything we have. So this was Sandra's move. Not a phone call anymore. A lawyer. The same accusation Tyler had made in a parking lot, now on an attorney's letterhead. I filed the letter with Sonia and waited. A week later, I found something in my mailbox. A handwritten note on plain paper, unsigned but unmistakably Tyler's handwriting. I'd known it since we were kids. The tone was different from the lawyer's letter. Less controlled. He wrote that he knew what I'd done. That the family would never forgive me. That if I tried to hide the estate, he would make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of person I was. The last line read, "The quiet ones always think they've won. They never have." I read it 3 times. Then I photographed it, put the original in an envelope, and mailed it to Sonia Cruz's office without writing anything in response. There was nothing to say back. Not yet. It was a Sunday evening, about 2 months into all of it, and I was sitting at the kitchen table in the house my grandparents had left me. Harold used to read the newspaper at this table every morning. He'd fold it in half, set it beside his coffee, and work through it section by section like he had all the time in the world. That table was the reason I hadn't been able to bring myself to change anything in the kitchen. Some things you leave alone because moving them would mean admitting the person is really gone. I sat there and let myself think through the full shape of what had happened. My brother had filed a fraudulent title transfer using a fake notary stamp on a government document. My mother had retained an attorney to call me a manipulator in writing. Somewhere out there, roughly 20 people who had watched me grow up now believed I had exploited 2 elderly people in their final months. I thought about selling the house, just putting it on the market, splitting whatever came out of it, and walking away from every single person involved. It would be over in 90 days. Nobody could touch me after that. I picked up my phone. I started to pull up my mother's number. I held it for a long moment. Then I put it down. I remembered the 19-minute phone call. I remembered every word she'd said about family and fairness and what Harold and Ruth would have wanted. And I remembered what she hadn't said, what she'd never once said, not in any call, not in any message, not at the funeral or after it. She hadn't asked how I was doing. Not once. I set my phone face down on the table and sat there until the kitchen went dark. The next morning, Megan showed up at the door with her laptop and a printed binder 2 inches thick. She set it on the table in front of me without much ceremony. Inside were the group chat screenshots, the voicemails Sandra had left on Megan's own phone complaining about me, filling in gaps in Tyler's narrative, the county's formal documentation of the flagged title transfer, and Sonia Cruz's full response file to Sandra's attorney. Megan sat down across from me. She said, "This is what they did. This is what you have. Don't give it back." That was all she needed to say. The morning after Megan left, I called Sonia Cruz and told her I was ready to move forward on everything. She didn't waste time. She laid out 3 steps in the order they needed to happen. First, respond to Sandra's attorney with a full documentation packet: the will, Gerald Price's records of Harold's mental clarity at the time of signing, and the county's flagged title transfer file. Second, establish the irrevocable trust before Tyler could make any further legal moves against the property. Third, coordinate directly with Mr. Levin, whose office had already referred the fraudulent filing to the county attorney for formal review. I asked her what irrevocable actually meant in practice. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Once this trust is in place, it cannot be undone. Not by you, not by them, not by anyone without a court order for cause. The house is locked." I wrote that down. 3 weeks later, it was done. The house, the 2 savings accounts, and the investment portfolio were transferred into a trust structure, with Sonia Cruz's office holding all documentation. The trust had a name. I'd chosen it the same afternoon Sonia first explained what it would do. I called it the Harold and Ruth Caldwell Family Trust. That was the only thing I did that week that felt like more than paperwork. Putting their names on it meant something I didn't have words for at the time. It still does. The irrevocable trust was the legal mechanism that protected everything. But the name was the reason I'd built it at all. I didn't tell Tyler. I didn't tell my mother. There was no announcement, no letter, no notification of any kind. I just waited. I knew my brother. I had spent 40 years watching how he operated, how he moved when he felt entitled to something, how quickly he acted when he thought no one was watching. I knew he wasn't finished. And I knew what not finished looked like for Tyler. It looked like a moving truck. So I called Mr. Levin and told him everything: the trust, the timeline, the fraudulent filing, and my reasonable belief that Tyler was going to attempt to take physical possession of the property. Mr. Levin listened without interrupting. His office had already been in contact with the county attorney's office about the forged notary seal. He said he'd be there when the time came. I also filed a non-emergency notification with the local police department, documenting the situation in writing. Then I went home and I made coffee and I sat on the front porch for a while. Grandpa Harold used to say, "Know your people." I knew mine. It was a Thursday morning, 7 weeks after the trust was established. At 7:43 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Tyler had posted on Facebook that he was coming to take back what was his. He'd tagged the address. I texted Mr. Levin. He replied within 2 minutes. "We're already on our way." I texted Sonia Cruz. She said, "You have everything you need. Stay calm." I made coffee. I pulled on a jacket. I went out and stood on the front porch and watched the street. The county sedan arrived at 8:47. The police cruiser pulled up behind it a few minutes later. Mr. Levin stepped out, nodded at me once, and we didn't say much after that. There wasn't much to say. The morning was cold and very quiet, and we just waited. At 9:17, the moving truck appeared at the end of the block. Tyler climbed out from the passenger side. He had the manila folder tucked under his arm, the same one I'd noticed at Gerald Price's office all those weeks ago. He scanned the front of the house and saw me on the porch. Then he saw the sedan. Then the cruiser. His stride slowed. Just enough. He kept walking. He stopped at the foot of the porch steps and opened the folder. "I have the title," he said. "This house is mine." Mr. Levin stepped forward and introduced himself as a representative of the County Land Registry Office. He spoke clearly and without any particular drama, the way people do when they've said something like this before. He explained that the title transfer application Tyler had filed had been reviewed and flagged because the notary seal on the document did not match any registered notary in the county. He explained that the property was currently held inside an irrevocable trust and that no transfer of ownership was legally possible without a court order issued for cause. He explained that the fraudulent title transfer was under active review by the county attorney's office. Tyler didn't say anything. The folder slipped from his hand. He didn't reach down to pick it up. I looked at my brother standing there at the foot of those porch steps. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. Mr. Levin had already said everything that needed saying, and he'd said it in plain language that left no room for a different interpretation. The officers spoke to Tyler briefly. They informed him that any attempt to enter the property or remove anything from the premises would constitute trespassing and create additional criminal exposure on top of the fraudulent filing already under review. Tyler listened. He picked up the folder from the ground. He walked back to the moving truck without looking at me again. The truck pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. I stood on the porch for another minute. Then I went inside and called Sonia Cruz. "Good," she said. "Now let's send the email." That evening, Sonia and I finalized a message addressed to 27 members of my extended family. We worked through every line carefully. There was no editorial commentary, no language about how anyone should feel, no attempt to characterize Tyler or my mother beyond what the documents themselves showed. The email contained a summary of the will and its recorded contents, documentation of the fraudulent title transfer and its current status with the county attorney, a copy of Sandra's attorney's demand letter, alongside Sonia's formal response, and Megan's compiled record of the group chat messages and voicemails that had circulated through the family over the previous 2 months. It ended with 2 sentences. "I am not asking anyone to choose sides. I am sharing this because several of you were told a version of events that the attached documents do not support." I hit send at 9:42 inches the evening. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep for the first time in 3 months. In the weeks that followed, I heard things secondhand the way I'd heard most things in this story through Megan, through Sonia Cruz, through the quiet accumulation of things that happened without my direct involvement. Tyler's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the county attorney's criminal review. That was the professional consequence of a fraudulent notary seal on a government document. I hadn't initiated it. The county had. I learned about it the same way you learn about weather after the fact, from someone who thought I should know. Sandra's attorney withdrew the $150,000 demand letter. Sonia Cruz sent me a 1-line email. "Sandra's counsel has formally withdrawn. You don't owe anyone anything." I read it twice and filed it with the rest. My mother didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out in any form. That silence was the thing I hadn't prepared for. Sandra had always had something to say. For as long as I could remember, she had an opinion, a position, a version of events she needed you to understand. The silence that came after the email wasn't peaceful, exactly. It was just different. It was what it sounded like when someone ran out of moves. I didn't call her either. Some of the 27 relatives responded to the email. 3 sent brief messages saying they weren't taking sides, which I understood without needing to read much into it. 4 reached out directly. An uncle told me he'd suspected something was wrong for years and hadn't said anything. A cousin apologized for going quiet when the group chat started. Megan's mother said she was glad someone had finally put it all in writing. The remaining 20 said nothing. I didn't take that silence as disapproval. People had been handed a document that contradicted a story they'd already accepted. That takes time to sit with. I knew that better than anyone. I gave them the time. Several months later, I was in the house on a cold December morning. The irrevocable trust documents are framed on the wall now, beside a photograph of Grandpa Harold taken in the backyard, one of the last ones, where he's squinting into the afternoon sun with a look of mild irritation at whoever was holding the camera. Exactly like himself. I'd had the photo for years and never known where to put it. It belongs there now. I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table. The same table where Harold used to sit with his newspaper every morning, working through it section by section like he had all the time in the world. The house was quiet. Not empty quiet, the way a place gets when it finally belongs to the right person and everyone who needed to understand that has run out of arguments. I thought about everything it had taken to get to that morning. The drives, the spreadsheets, the 11 minutes in a grocery store parking lot, the binder Megan brought to the door, the folder that hit the ground on the front porch steps. I thought about what Tyler had written in that note. The quiet ones always think they've won. They never have. He was wrong about that, but not in the way he expected. I hadn't won anything, exactly. I'd kept a promise. There's a difference. Grandpa always said, "Know your people." Turns out, knowing them is enough.